So this is Craig Sheridan and Sean McDonald. You're on the AMPS Studio podcast. We've been doing this from the start of last lockdown. And as you can see from our environments, we are currently back in the lockdown. But we're moving forward. It's 2021. I'm very glad that you could join us today. So if you haven't joined us before, this studio chat is for Sean and I to keep up with what's going on. Sean and I manage and coordinate the recording and mixing sessions in AMP Studio, as well as doing a bunch of things outside that. And this is a way for us to keep current with both our practices and any new technologies that we're discovering and enjoying at the moment. So Sean, thanks very much for joining me this morning. What have been keeping you busy?
A lot. Work has been quite busy recently, and but to be quite honest, I've sort of fell behind a wee bit in the world of producing and recording and stuff, because haven't had the chance to get in the studio, haven't even had the chance to rehearse or anything like that. But I have been getting my teeth into some new pieces of software, some new plugins and stuff like that. So that's sort of been keeping me busy anyway. Lovely.
I've been did a few things actually. We have moved, obviously we're out of the Conway Mill, the recording studio space in the training centre. Now we're taking that opportunity to update all the Mac Minis that we're operating with, and we have new hard drives and maxed out RAM on them. So we're going to go back as soon as we're open again with flying machines in the training studio. We are also looking at new Mac Minis as well for the studio. Sorry, not Mac Minis, MacBook Pros with the new M1 chip. So we're going to be testing those over the next while. And I have just finished delivering level 3 mixing with two graduates or undergraduates. One's a graduate, one's an undergraduate from Queen's University, and they're just wrapping up this week. And then we're going to be moving into obviously offering the level 2 mixing. All sorts of stuff going on for AMPS. On the Given Hand side of things, started doing a kind of coaching thing for the new year. I've got kind of 4 people who are meeting regularly to set goals and to work towards them goals. And that's all very encouraging and very positive. And I've been working very closely with 2 artists in particular since December last year. So lots on the go, Sean. Lots on the go.
Yeah.
What the first thing I want to ask you about, what's your exciting new technology, Sean? I'm always keen to geek out.
Well, at Christmas there, I finally got my first bass guitar,
right? Okay.
Which is the first update I have to give, because all the years I've been playing guitar and recording stuff, and I've never actually owned a bass guitar. Always either used virtual instruments or had another bassist, play tracks for me, or if there was a bass handy, I was able to use it. But actually sitting down and learning the more intricacies of bass playing and stuff has been interesting. But that actually then, because I was sort of going, well, I don't necessarily need all these bass instruments and stuff on the from the plugins anymore. I sort of went, right, I can do a bit of a clear out here, and I could see some of the ones that I wasn't using as much, and a load of free plugins that I had downloaded, and went, I downloaded them but never even used them. So I cleared a bit of space, and I was like, well, what else is out there? And I started looking at reviews for stuff, and seeing what was people in the industry were starting to use a bit more often now. And for the last year or so, one of the main things I've been using has been Pigments by Arturia for my virtual synth engine, and I love it, and it's a really great synth engine. But what I've noticed recently, and well, for years, but more so recently, that people are Serum has sort of been has just got more and more prominent as years have went on, and people seem to be using that as like the main synth engine, and overtaken Massive. And there seems to be like a lot more cool presets going about for Serum, and so we're like, there's a big community of people sharing sounds and stuff. So I wanted to get in on that a wee bit. So I says I'm gonna get my hands on Serum finally, and get to know it a bit better. So that has been fantastic. And then just some general ones as well, like the Valhalla Delay, always been a big fan of the Valhalla reverbs, and I've used them quite extensively. So thought I would get the delay and see how that goes on some of the tracks, and been using it on some wee demos. It's been quite cool.
Yeah, lovely. I've been just last night battling with waves. I have a very long-term history with waves. I've been using for a long time. We use them in the studio, and when they work, they're very reliable. But last night, for some reason, my USB pen decided, I don't know where your wave license is, so I tried to update that, and then went to scan the licenses, and it was coming up that all my older licenses, the version 9s, I have 9, 10, 11 and 12 licenses, all the version 9 licenses are no longer appearing on the hard drive. So there's going to be a lot of fun this week trying to make sure that all that's recovered. And my big fear, I don't know how to navigate this, luckily I've got the Mac Mini as a backup machine anyway, so the strategy is to make sure that all the project files are together and then port it over to the other machine in the worst case scenario. But I don't want to run the update or reinstall the plugins in case it loses the plugin settings, especially now on client work too. So that's going to be a fun way to navigate that. So
because you're quite like you like to have quite a quick workflow, and I know like you have all your templates and all your plugin set a certain way that you've worked on for a long time. So I think I would really be detrimental for you to lose all those.
Well, getting the template back up again would be sweet. Going through all the client work and trying to get that back again is hours upon hours of work that's already been done that I really don't want to have to redo. So if anybody knows how to quickly resolve that, share it, or get that information, or send me a link to somewhere that can fix that quickly. And when I resolve it, we'll no doubt talk about it in the next podcast. It will be resolved. We will fix everything as we do. We'll take control of it.
Yeah, the one of the things you mentioned there to start was about the new MacBook Pros that are coming into the studio and setting those up and everything. But there's actually been, for this new M1 chip being so fast and stuff, there's actually been quite a lot of discussion in the music community about the possibilities it brings to production and recording and engineering, because it's a new, it's sort of, as you're saying, a new generation of speed and processing power that will open up so many more doors. And it's going to be, I think it's an interesting conversation to have, to see, talking about how creative people can get with this.
Well, that's it. And for me, anyway, when we were talking about getting the new equipment and moving forward, there was the conversation that, okay, we should get a MacBook Pro anyway, one of the i9 MacBook Pros. And then we should get one of the M1 chips, and then we're covered for both bases, so that if we need to continue to work on older Intel stuff, then we've got that. But all the research that I did into the M1 chip is indicating that it's night and day difference, and it's a fraction of the cost, and it gives you the same kind of performance, which obviously means you can get more resources off the back of that, whether that be plugins or whether that be headphones or whether that be additional equipment to help you along. For me, like you, I was thinking, this is the new generation of Mac, so even if all the software isn't compatible right now at the time of purchase, by the time the next generation comes in, the second, the M2 chip, the MX chip, whatever they want to call it, by the time it comes in, all the developers will be up to speed with that, and in the next 2 years, everything will be up to speed with that. And although that, there's still going to be that crossover period, and we're not in a position now where we absolutely have to jump, but it's a good idea, I think, to get in now and troubleshoot it, so that when we do move the whole system over to that we're already up and running, and we have test machines and we can do all that, instead of making the leap and realizing Pro Tools isn't working, or the iLock isn't working. So it's a good time now to test ground. But I mean, we were planning on buying the MacBook Air anyway as a admin resource, and we were just kind of waiting for the Arts Council funding to be confirmed, and in that waiting period, Mac had introduced the M1. So I mean, we're kind of getting like a MacBook Pro spec on the MacBook Air anyway. So that's going to be really exciting to see how that works out. But I've seen a lot of things about a lot of software isn't compatible yet, and it's not quite running as smooth yet. And then I've seen of a more recent research where everyone is suggesting that running through Rosetta, you're getting the same kind of performance as you were using the Intel stuff anyway. So if that's the case, if it's consistent that way, I'm happy enough that we've got a newer machine with newer technology that's running slicker and giving us the same performance as a 2019 or 2020 MacBook Pro. I'm totally fine with that for what it is. And then when everybody catches up and the code's streamlined and it runs more effectively natively, then we'll see an increase in that too. So for me, it was a no-brainer. It's just how we navigate and what the best practice for that is. But it also means now we've got Logic licenses in the studio, so we can deliver training and support in Logic projects too. With the currently we weren't able to do just because we didn't have the Logic licenses. But it'll be very exciting. So we have Live, we have Logic. We have older versions of Reasons that don't run anymore, but Reason really hasn't changed in 10 years anyway. So anytime I open Reason, it's like, oh, I'm familiar with this no matter what. And of course the Pro Tools, the new version of Pro Tools. So it'll be exciting running stuff through that if we ever get the chance to record people again. So
I know, and like everything, there's two sides to every coin. So I think for all the positives that this brings in, I think what some people might be saying is that, you know, with higher processing speeds, compatibility, as you say, is going to be an issue, and we could see even you know, DAWs looking at, you know, focusing on higher fidelity audio, and, you know, and more taking up more storage, and then for people with older systems, it's going to mean, you know, they're going to have to upgrade to higher processing chips and stuff in the next few years. But then again, for if you look on the other side of that, you know, there's been a conversation going on about budget audio interfaces, you know, and how, you know, like the likes of your Focusrites and AM audio fast tracks and stuff, that like those cheaper, like the budget audio interfaces, you know, have a bit of latency when you're trying to record a large project and stuff like that. And that, you know, there's a big push now for home recording, you know, and budget recording for people that have to spend on, you know, the Apaches and those interfaces that have like the processing built into them, you know, and lay out a couple £100 on a processor rather than £100. But I think with faster chips in the computers, it's going to mean lower latency then again, and then maybe it'll be better for the interface sort of market as well then.
Well, I mean, even compared to like 5 years ago, interface technology is at a level now where it's already outstanding. I mean, what you can buy now for £150 is like a whole new world compared to where it was 10 years ago. So obviously the interface technology is going to increase, and it's going to increase to work in line with the system on a chip, the SoC of the new Mac. And I think the big thing here is that we're getting involved in this from the ground. Like, this is first generation. This is like when the next generation is released later in this year, it's going to make this generation look slow. But at the same time, this generation is going to make the current Intel look slow. That doesn't mean, though, that your Intel computer isn't going to still last you like 5 years. I mean, I know people who, like, even recently, we have a 32-bit copy of Cubase 6.5, and I recently did a mix on it, and it was rock solid. So, I mean, as an audio mixer, it worked perfectly fine, and all the native plugins are working flawlessly because it was built for that system. So you're still going to be able to get professional results out of an older machine. But being a technology-based company with recording and training, we kind of need to be up on this stuff. But I mean, your average user doesn't necessarily need to be on the bleeding edge of technology. And it was a tough decision for me because it was a case of, do we buy the 27-inch 10-core iMac and have a beast of a machine that'll sit and be an absolute powerhouse? Or do we get something that allows us the mobility with a similar kind of performance? Not the same performance by any stretch of the imagination, but the similar kind of performance and a better performance than what we get for the equivalent Intel MacBook. But the average user doesn't necessarily need that powerhouse. So don't throw your Intel computers in the bin just yet, is my suggestion. Like, even in the given hand scenario here, I still have 2 Intel-based Macs that aren't going anywhere. And they're going to probably be the workhorses still until this new system is more, I can trust it. And I'll probably do a lot more of just Logic because it runs natively of it. I'll do the logic training on the new machine and test it and have a period where I can test plugins and make sure that all that works before porting projects onto it and relying on it. And I don't know how it works if you're going between backup machines too. So one of the big testing things we need to work out is if we have a project enabled in our Cubase on the M1 Mac Mini, if I take that to my Intel with the same plugins and the same software, will it still open? Even, you know, if we're going across operating systems. So that's going to be the big catch, because if there's a disconnect there, then we maybe need to look at it as in a different scenario. You know, is it fit for purpose, or do we need to get two of these M1 machines in order to have that backup system in place? So lots of questions to be worked out the next way, but that's the fun part of testing, and I suppose that's what Lockdown 2 for.
Yeah.
So what's been inspiring you then, Sean?
Not a lot. Nothing comes to mind. And I'm always expecting that question, but I don't know what it is. I feel like this lockdown has been harder on productivity and you know, mentality. I don't know if you feel the same. I think it's sort of like a triple whammy at this stage. In terms of, you know, you just want this to be over already, and just seems to be getting in the way of things. And I think there was a bit more flexibility, especially with the last lockdown, in terms of being able to you know, still get out there and use certain services and stuff like that. But now it's still a lot hate. Well, not so much hate. It's just blank. You know, don't be meeting up at all. So it's tough, you know, not collaborating. It's tough not jamming, and it's tough not recording. So there's not a lot of inspiration going on. But still writing music and still trying to do what I can. But they're mostly they're on the sadder side at the minute. Yeah, I
totally get that. And this a winter lockdown is different because it's not even the same amount of daylight. Even though you can still go out, it's not as bright or as warm. And it's that, like, the weather the past few weeks has been so cold. The snow was very refreshing, but that was fairly inspiring for me too. So it was the first time we got to take our daughter out in the snow, and she got to experience that, and that was absolutely fantastic. It was good snow. It was good thick snow that laid.
Did you make a snowman?
We tried to. It didn't work out too well. But we did that. I was teaching her how to throw snowballs and that. And then my wife and her father had her up a hill, and she was sliding down on stuff, and she had a great time. And it was it's good when there's a toddler about. They get very excited about things, so it's very infectious that way. And you know, I always thought about the inconvenience of having children, but no one really explains to you the crack of how excited they get about things and how much joy that is. So she's been very distracted and very helpful in that scenario. But one of the other things that, because you were saying about being cut off, and you were saying about the idea that you can't meet up with people and you're cut off that way. And I think everyone's kind of feeling that frustration too. That's the reason why I started the goal setting thing at the start of the year, because I knew if we're heading into a new lockdown, especially because everyone had the summer lockdown to Ableton was on free license, so people who were interested in getting involved in music technology would have got that and spent that, but that license is now expired. So the people who would have bought it have bought it, and the people who still haven't got an income to buy it haven't bought it, so they're kind of reset again. But some of the people who I was in touch with and contact with about doing some coaching, when they were talking to me about what they're going to do, I could see that the focus and the passion was being lost, and that's why I started doing the giving hands goalies. And it's just a regular contact and keeping people accountable for stuff that you want to do. And it's kind of a bit like this, I suppose, where, you know, we're talking about what we're working on, and we're talking about the new things that we'll have to do, and it makes that ambition a reality simply from talking about it out loud and giving the focus to it. So are you meeting up with a band much? Are you setting band goals? Are you giving the lads tasks, or how are you managing that system?
You know, and again, going back to the first lockdown, we had I had give each of the lads one of the lads I had like a wee home recording setup, but the other two I give them wee small interfaces that I had about, and and we were recording like we stuff remotely, you know, not anything proper, but just small demos, and we made some like we acoustic versions of some of the tunes and stuff like that, and stuck them up on YouTube. But I don't know what it is. I'm a bit I think work has become a bit heavier in terms of the radio station and stuff, because now that I've sort of got used to it, I've made myself a bit more work. In lockdown, and I know now so I've made, for my own fault, I've made myself a bit busier, so left a bit less time for other stuff like that. But also there's a bit less ambition there, as you in terms of, you know, doing anything together anyway. I think we really just want to get together again in person somehow, but it's not going to happen for the next few weeks anyway. But I've still been demoing wee stuff on my own. But I think maybe in the next 2 weeks or so, I might try and get them guys to add some parts to what I'm doing and stuff like that. I've set myself a goal, not only with Search Party, but also with I too. I have there's a whole bank of stuff there, and because we don't have a drummer in that band anyway and stuff, you know, there is a lot more possibilities to record and stuff at home, and at least demos. I suppose the other news we have coming up for AMPS is the website, which I'm very excited about, because I think it's going to be a whole new way for us to demonstrate the work that we do, and to showcase, you know, what the studio's all about, because it's often it's so complicated to try and tell someone
what is it that you do, right?
So this is going to be fantastic, just to be able to go here. It's the same with the radio as well. You know, when everybody asks about Radio YNP and they're like, what does the station do? The easiest thing to do is just link them to the website, because the website, you know, lets them see it visually. It lets them explore it and find out the information that they want to find out about it, and explains it a lot better than I'm ever going to do. And I hope that this new AMPS website is going to do the same.
Well, that's it. So we're having a whole new redesign, a new interface, a new booking system, just a whole fresh take, because we got the update of the website about 7 or maybe 7 years ago, and I always felt that it was kind of coming to the point where it needed the refresh anyway. But studio manager Sal took the initiative and went and organised some stuff, and we are now in the midst of the update. So more information on that coming soon, and you can book studio time, or you can book rehearsal space in it, or you can book a mix in it, or it's a very immediate user interface. What the plan is, I can't wait to see how it turns out.
And I think it'll give us a better platform as well, to like us personally, like to showcase like our services too, because I find it a bit confusing, you know, when you know, I'm trying to put out, you know, like the you know, mixing services and recording services as well that I do, because, you know, with the two bands, with the radio stuff, with you know, promoting gigs and everything else, I feel like as if I'm really polluting people's news feeds already. and the fact that, you know, and a few years ago, you know, doing like function DJing and stuff like that, and I've that, and like rehearsal space and recording and stuff have more been sort of word of mouth promotion for me, because I haven't really found that way of how do I promote these services that I do in a way that somebody's just not going to go like, what is it he does this, he does that, you know. I don't get it, you know. But I think the website having you know, us having our space on that to sort of say this is what we're doing, somewhere to redirect someone to, is going to be a lot easier to communicate that message.
Oh yes, yes.
I can't wait for it.
So it'll be a very interesting thing, and I don't want to give away too much, because it's still in development yet. So there'll be more on the website. We'll probably do a bit on the website, and we'll probably do a whole lot of newsfeed polluting ourselves whenever the website's up and ready to launch. But it definitely will clarify and simplify what we do and how you can get involved with it. Which is a very exciting thing, of course, for us. So the next thing then, Sean, what have you been overcoming, man? What struggles have you actually been overcoming?
My cat's health. God love him. I think in the last episode, you may have seen Bobby the cat.
Bobby the mascot. The mascot.
The mascot. Oh, I could have forget. But wee Bobby the cat has had an awful time with his with his ears. He had like he was born, I think, from the first owner that we got him off. Has had these like ear mates, and getting rid of those has been a long old road. And I think, not to scub myself, I think we're getting further. It's a random tangent that bring it, but that really is such a big achievement for us to get over the line with this here. And in a music sense, I think I've had a wee touch of writer's block the last couple of weeks, and something that has helped me overcome that has been getting active again, believe it or not.
Physically, you mean?
Physically, yeah. So I hadn't been able to get out running or walking or anything over Christmas time. It, like a mix of laziness and cold weather sort of stopped me. But the last few weeks, got out walking, and having wee talks, with family and stuff, while being out on walks, and then going for jogs and stuff. And I don't know why, but coming home from that always seems to clear my head, but also give me a bit of space there to think about writing, about being productive musically. I don't know why, but always spurs me on a bit, and so that's helped me overcome that.
I think it's a fantastic point. Whenever, especially in a lockdown scenario, whenever you're in a confined space mentally, then you're also in a confined space too. And the things that would have interested or excited you, or you might have picked up and run with previously, have become uninspiring. Probably is probably the word. I mean, it's amazing what fresh air can do. It's amazing. Like even in the room that we're in now. At times, even just opening the window changes how I feel about things. And it's even better if you get that wee bit where it's a wee bit cold, and before you know it, you're actually a bit chilly. And it's like your state has changed, so your thinking has changed. And some people do that with cold showers too. And I remember hearing a conversation one time about starting your day with a cold shower and get your blood pumping and get you awake and get you ready for the day. But I mean, I can think of more pleasant ways than jumping into a cold shower. I had to do that. What
about you? What have you overcome yourself?
Learning patience. As you can see, this is still the same room that I'm recording this podcast in as when I started talking about moving house at the start of lockdown the first time. So we are going through a very we must have a very diligent solicitor who makes sure that all the things are sorted out. So fair play for the detail, but things are just presented that need to be smoothed out. The process is taking much longer than my patience is wanted. However, that is secondary on my list to the plug-in panic that has just happened yesterday, so that needs to be addressed, and it's overcoming. That's going to be the triumph of my week. On top of that, then got really kind of quick and efficient at dealing with clients and getting projects to mixed, get it to the finished point, because I've had a bit more interaction, and I've had a very busy January, which I'm very grateful for. So overcoming the I suppose the lockdown itself hasn't really affected me as much this time, because I went into it knowing what to expect. I've got a stack of work to work through anyway, and I regularly speak with people through Zoom, and we get out for walks at least twice a weekend anyway. As a family, we go out and get some fresh air. So I think the family scenario for me has been a real saving grace, and it's been a work thing to get over, and the patience thing with moving house. But in general, I think the biggest problem for me right now is getting this solved, because if I don't get this resolved this week, then it's going to knock off all the rest of the appointments for this week, and it's going to knock off all the rest of the work. So this is the thing that I'm overcoming. We're currently in the midst of it, Sean. Not a ramble. So
what's on your wish list?
Well, I got some things on my wish list actually. So I have brand spanking new Sennheiser HD 600s, which are very fancy headphones that have arrived and need to be burned in over there's a 300 hours you're supposed to burn in speakers for. So as you can see, I use these headphones, the Audio Technicas, and they're very, very good, but they're DJ headphones, and they swivel and they sit and they're great. But what I've noticed about them is, you can see this one, you see it's sitting slightly off the side of my head. If I'm trying to do a mix with that, sometimes that throws off my perception of how accurate the bass is. Now I have to fix them and then they sit right, but if I'm working over time, and they sit perfect when you angle them, and that's the whole point of these, but they're so flexible that they move, and they're not always, you have to check them on occasion. It's good for taking breaks, but you have to check them on occasion, where these, and they're close back, so it completely blocks out the background, and that's fantastic for DJing. But when it comes to a mixing scenario, I didn't have any open back headphones to work with, and the Sennheisers are open back and they sit still, so when you put them on, they don't move, so you're going to have that same representation of the frequencies in both ears. Well, nice. As long as both ears hears the same, which is a whole different conversation. So that was on the wish list. The MacBook Pros are ordered. It's going to be here as soon as it gets here, and I got upgraded from Live 10 Standard to Live 10 Suite, and then I get the free upgrade to Live 11, which is going to be very exciting too. And I have Logic on the way. So that and a bunch of other plugins has me very busy and very excited and feeling productive. So what's on your wish list, Tom?
In particular, I think it's been eating away at me for a bit, but I'm bussing to get my hands on like a few Sound Toys plugins. I would love to try the Sound Toys bundle, of the Decapitator limiter, like the Crystal Laser and the Echoboy Junior, all that bundle. I've just seen so many more producers and engineers online making use of them, and just like the difference a few clicks makes. I don't know, I'm a sucker for that. I'm a real sucker for plugins that you hear the immediate effect, and that there's a big bank of presets, so that I like to flick through and then make minor tweaks. I don't like to spend an awful lot of time really indulging in a plugin. I like one that sort of does its job itself. And you can just hear it right away. And it's the complete opposite of the way I would have been a few years back. I would have sat with and made such minute changes, that a plugin I'm really learning inside out. But now, for some reason, I just want something that has a lot of nice sounds already loaded in when you put it up, and you can just flick through different presets and go, oh yeah, I like that one, maybe a bit less of this and a bit more of that. And Sound Toys seem to have mastered that style, and a lot of the recreation of the old hardware stuff too. Just, it sounds gorgeous. Like
I got the Suite about 2 years ago, I think, because at the time Decapitator was about 140 quid and Echoboy was about 120 quid, and there was another one I was looking at, and the three of them added up to round about the same cost as the bundle. So I was thinking, I'm just going to spend a bit extra and get the whole bundle and just eat beans this month. So Crystallizer is amazing, right? But you use it once or twice and you're thinking, it does the same thing. it does that's what it does. And instantly when you hear it, you know what it is. And if you love that, then awesome. And that's based on one of the Avantade. It's all Sound Toy stuff is based off old Avantade ideas, because
Yeah.
the boy who started that was one of the major developers for Avantade or Eventide, whatever you pronounce it.
I've heard it said both ways.
Yep. Echoboy's in my autoload, without reserve. Even Echoboy Junior, they were giving away free for a while, and it's brilliant. The secret to that, though, right? Not the secret, but a secret with that plugin is, see, if you put it all the way to wet, it has all those tape machine manipulations, so you get the character of the tape without even getting the delay. So it's useful in two instances. The delays are brilliant because you can shuffle them forward, or you can swing them back, and you can ping pong them, or you can have them dual. And it's a very, very, very flexible thing. You can also add an LFO in to make the pitch wobble up and down, and create density to make it more like a reverb. So in terms of Swiss Army knife, Echoboy is up there with, well, Echoboy and H delay would probably be my tag team when it comes to delays, because there's bags of character in both of them. Ace delay you can't really trust, but because the feedback on that thing goes wild and goes crazy, so you kind of have to capture it. But if you're going to get one of them, Outboard straight away. Now, Decapitator is really good. Decapitator was probably my first introduction to proper harmonic distortion, and you have the 5 buttons along the front, and they all give you different flavors of harmonic distortion. It's really good for that, and good for adding extra bite and extra crunch and extra drive. But there's also the tone control, which makes a huge difference, because sometimes when you're driving things, it can get a bit brittle. But if you roll back on the EQ and increase the bright tone, you get this really pleasant sweetening, brightening of the mid-range instead of the harsh top-end bite. So by all means, I would advise you to get that. Now, Soundtoys also do the rack, Soundtoys rack, which is basically a preset player with a bunch of chained effects already in place. And I think it's quite reasonable. I think it's only like 120 quid, and you get a bunch of presets ready to go. So it may be worth looking at that on a more immediate basis, or kind of getting them one at a time. But I get them. Radiator 2 is another smasher. It's an emulation of a tube preamp. So there was a client I was working with at one point who had sampled an MP3, which sounded a bit shitty. And it was the way sometimes when you get an MP3, you get that kind of harsh bite around about 1K, 2K, and it's a bit kind of exhausting. When we dipped that out a bit to try and make it a bit sweeter anyway, it wasn't going anywhere. But I put a couple of instances of Radiator on it, and it all of a sudden it seemed a bit warmer and a bit less digital and cold. So it was just a tiny wee snippet of a vocal, but I think there was like a hi-hat in behind it too. It wasn't really happening. But in doing that, it took away the severity of the digital crushing-ness, and put it in there. It was supposed to sound a bit textured anyway, so the MP3 thing did make a huge issue. But Radiator definitely brought some warmth back to it, some feeling back to it. That wasn't just a kind of sterile cold wee snip. So they're very, very, very useful tools. There's what do you call the delay one too? It's blue, and there's like different color sliders on it. I can't remember the name of that one. But it gets crazy. There's some very, very interesting tones you can get on it. But again, it's a bit like Ace Delay where it goes a bit crazy. But just get your hands on the Soundtoy stuff, Sean, because it's instant vibe.
Definitely on the wish list. Like,
and anything else? Anything technology wise? Or were we? Sorry.
I watched a review. Don't know if you've ever. Funny enough, we were talking about Eventide or Avantide, and one of the people I watched got their hands on the Avantide H9000, and it brought up had a sort of argument for me, about digital effects and hardboard gear. Right. H9000 retails about $5,500, right? It's a big, massive multi-processor. But it's all digital effects, and it's just a big, obviously, like the Avantade stuff, absolutely amazing, the sounds they produce and stuff, but it's still all digital effects, and it's all, it's stuff that that can be produced in their virtual sort of plugins and stuff, and it got me thinking. I was going, where does that fit into someone's, like studio, where does that fit in? Like, who finds that? Where do you have £5,500 to spend on an effects unit like that that's digital? You know, there's the argument maybe that, you know, it's basically like a computer just for your effects. But again, if you've got £5,500 to spend on an effects processor, I would dare say you have a good amount of money to have a really powerful computer anyway.
But you're assuming that someone runs their operation centrally from the computer. So when the H9000 was doing its thing, like early versions of SSL had automation that you had to kind of save the floppy disk. So that it's the same as the early kind of Fairlight stuff and the CMI technology, that early day sampling technology that sounds outstanding still. Mega money. And it's more than just the digital processing, it's the audio conversion to digital and from digital, and the quality of that too. So it's the quality of the converters and the components that you're paying for, as well as the algorithms, and even the software that we're getting now in plugins. Like we have the Anthology, the whole Advantage suite, and that sounds awesome. Like, see that reverb, it sounds like money as soon as you put it on.
Yeah, it's like we always have like it set up on the tracking template. You know, like all of us just for recording vocals, it just, as soon as it, you know, you hear your voice tracked with it, you know, it just gives it that extra bit of space.
Absolutely. But I would say that that algorithm is a stripped down version of the actual algorithm, because they need to make it efficient to work on computers across multiple platforms, where it's the pairing of this code runs on this hardware very specifically. That's where the real fine tuning comes. And it's a bit like the Mac M1 conversation, that even with the smaller chip and the lower amount of RAM, it can be more efficient and create less heat because it's purpose built for that reason. So you're coming, I think you're approaching that from a point now where we live in a tremendous time of music technology luxury, where any DAW that you buy now already is a studio. It's got everything you need to do exactly this job. But that wasn't the case in the mid 80s and the late 80s, when these things were really taking off in studios. But again, the setup like a studio, like a 24 channel recording desk studio like AMPS, you would have been talking 50 grand, probably 50 grand in the 80s, just to have that capability. So what do you think about that, the conversation that the purpose-built hardware that's digital? And you could even make this argument for like the early Yamaha reverb, like the SPX machines that you can buy on eBay for like 60 quid now.
Yeah, it'd be different if it was analog, and it would be different if it was a cheap digital machine, you know, that you can maybe have, you know, like some of those like those cheap multi-effects processors, like there's the ones that you can get for dead cheap, the Behringer ones and everything else. You know, it's handy just to be able to run something through that, you know, and have really nice presets that you can run through. It's tactile as well, you know, you're not clicking through with a mouse and stuff. You have a bit of an interface you can work with there.
Yeah.
But I'm just going to myself, $5,500, like it just seems a bit counterproductive. Yeah, overkill. But don't get me wrong, this, like, some of the sounds on it were phenomenal. Like, and I think maybe for if I think of people who are like into like modular synthesis and like lots of like experimental music and stuff like that, it would be, you know, I could see that client base being, you know, where it's aimed at, to get the weirdest sounds and the weirdest possible, you know, effects, and those people just have the money to throw at hardware gear as well. I think that's where that type of gear is sort of looking at.
Well, the thing is, like, does high-end hardware gear really depreciate in value?
That's true.
I mean, like, at a certain point, right, there's the diminishing returns conversation where you might spend 20 grand extra to hear 5% difference, right? But in spending that money, the people who want that item and want that performance they're likely to spend the same kind of money anyway. So like the new version of the ACE9000 that's just been released, the one that you're talking about, it actually runs off quad-core ARM processors, which is the same system on a chip idea that's in phones. So like it's got to run quiet, it's got to run next to silent in a recording environment. That's handy. And it can operate up to 16 channels over USB. I'm reading this from the Untitled Audio website, sorry. And it's obviously got the remote control. So the thing that always kind of confused me about those real high end devices was, are you limited to like one return? Like, can you like once you know if you're using a vocal reverb, is that it done? You know. But obviously, if there's a quad core processor, there's probably multiple inputs and outputs, and you can assign that to each different channel.
I would like to think so.
Well, for $6,000, you'd want that flexibility. But I mean, they are very lovely. But it reminds me of before even that generation, that digital processor came in, the Lexicon stuff, the PCM stuff, PCM, the black and blue collection. But it had similar algorithms taken from that, but put in a more consumer based unit. But even trying to buy those now, you're still talking upwards of £500, and they can be run straight SPDIF, digital in and out, so there's no loss of audio at any point along the way. I have one of the LPXs, the Lexicon LPX, but I find that when you go in and out digitally, it loses a bit of that character, because that's what we're talking about. It's the digital to audio conversion. So if I come out of my sound card and go into it as an audio send, the way you go through a mixing desk, it sounds different than when you go straight in and out through the SPDIF, which is the light connection. And the SPDIF is definitely cleaner and more transparent, but it's not quite the texture that I want from that thing. So it's interesting that to have those dual outputs, and that might just be because it's a cheaper box. It's only £500 compared to £5,000, but it's still much more expensive than a Valhalla plugin. Do you know what I mean? Which gives you probably, arguably, a more contemporary and better effect.
I don't know if you can hear, but there's a pile driver like basically right behind my house, you know, like with building on. So I don't know if you can hear the banging, but it's not only banging the floor, my head is now banging with the
yeah.
Me up this morning.
No, we can't hear it on the mic. Is that a 58 you're using?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, good old cardio.
Good advertisement.
Yeah, I hear nothing. You might have heard that something just fell across my room there. Did you hear that? Or was the 58 also keeping that one out of shot?
I was keeping it out, but I saw you getting distracted. And
I was like, what? Which is the reason that we use cardioid mics, by the way, for anyone who, because a lot of people might look at this and think, why are you using 58s? And why aren't you using the kind of the big what do you call them, the
microphones, like EV2020s and all.
Aye, like why do that? And the real reason is because we're in domestic environments, like, people could call to the house, or somebody could be walking through the house, and these microphones only have a certain pickup radius, so it only picks up what we're talking about. And that's the big reason that these things are so really useful on a stage, because when you've got multiple sound sources, you want a very narrow pickup radius. The betas are better than these ones. These are 58, but this has been the same DJ mic, the same mic has been in my bag, my DJ bag, for years and years and years and years and years. And it doesn't sound any different now than the day I got it. Paint job could do with the sprucing, mind you, but I like it. It's got character.
Yeah. Good old reliable. But on the opposite end of that, talk about new things. There's a new big time player in the DAW world with Universal Audio bringing out Luna.
Luna, yes, I've seen that for the Apollo systems.
So, and lots of good reviews in from it. So,
well, anyone that I've spoke to or listened to who've used it have been saying that where Pro Tools recently introduced the heat system, which was a kind of a subtle saturation that you kind of get off tape. Luna has a whole lot of that processing already built in. So you're already getting that, and it's a bit like the Sound Toys conversation. It already has that vibe instantly as you use it, just as a colouring. So it'll be interesting to hear. We, as part of the new equipment lineup, also got some UAD stuff. So we should have a UAD twin duo, I think. So,
but it sort of seems the direction that Pro Tools and now with Universal Audio, which has always been their crack, is just removing latency latency from the picture.
Yeah.
I think again with going back to the M1 chip and the increased power and stuff that we're seeing in computers as well in this generation, I definitely think the big focus in the audio world is going to be on removing latency, on like giving you more access to having long effects chains while while you're recording, lots of inline processing, and not letting that affect the speed of your recording, or how much buffering you have to do to while tracking. So it's going to be really interesting.
It's interesting you should say that, actually, because we use Pro Tools HDX system. It is HDX, isn't it? Pro Tools HDX. And it still uses the older version of the Pro Tools plugins. And the whole idea with that is it was plugins on the insert at low latency. So when it's the TDM system, not the HDX system, the TDM system. So it doesn't sound quite as warm, so to speak, as later versions of Pro Tools. Just read that, it's more digitally bright. But for the latency, for the absolute zero latency, that people we can run them plugins in TDM version, and it runs off processor chips built into the 192, the interface, and it does all that processing internally on the way in, and it sounds phenomenal, and it's rock solid. So inline processing isn't necessarily new to this generation of processors. Pro Tools were doing that a long time ago, but I think the cost of entry is significantly lowered, and the flavor of being able to do it is much more interesting now than that, because the Pro Tools was quite clean. And even in that Pro Tools system, we're still using the API, preamp and the compressor and the EQ on the way in the Pro Tools to give us character before we process it. So it'll be interesting to see with this UAD how that preamp stage works too, because it can also add the character. We also have the liquid mix too, the Focusrite liquid mix, that also has sample preamps in a way. It's called convolution. So you run stuff through it and it gives you an approximation of what the preamp would do. So when we tested those previously, there wasn't a huge enough difference between them that if it was in the mix that you would tell, oh, that one's through the liquid mix and that one's through the API. They were very, very close, and so close to the fact that one of the previous engineers who used to work here, Kevin, would have set them up as a stereo pair, and you couldn't tell the difference. You couldn't tell which one was which, depending on what you were recording. So it'll be interesting to see what the UAD stuff does. The UAD obviously has a much prettier interface, but that it's much more engaging to use. And their plugins can be driven much harder than most other plugins, in all honesty. But the thing with the UAD plugin, because I have an older UAD Solo here, every generation of the plugins get hungrier and hungrier and hungrier. So where I started off with one chip, and I used to be able to get maybe 10 or 15 plugins off the back of that chip. Now it's a case that if I use that with a newer version of the software, I don't get as many, or it's not as efficient anymore because the code's more demanded on the chip. So there's always that trade-off that the better sound quality comes at the expense of higher power. But I suppose that's where your argument comes in, Sean, about the newer versions of, the newer native chips might bypass the need for that.
Yeah. I'm interested to see the likes of, do you ever see your man Jacob Collier? And sometimes he does rundowns of his sessions on his DAW, right? And
is he a jazz musician, or am I thinking of someone else?
What?
The jazz piano player?
Yeah, he's like a jazz musician, yeah. But you see some of his sessions sometimes, and he's got one channel set up for one for each separate piece of choir, or for one harmony or whatever, it's and each one of them is processed, and I'm going, what tape? How is his computer possibly running that? His computer must hate him. But if he's able to do that on current generation, it'd be interesting to see what like how big the sessions are going to be in the next generation.
Well, I've seen loads of stuff touted about 155 plugins and stuff, but my hesitation with all that is that's fine. But what about an actual mix session when you're, because the danger here is your computer is powerful enough, and even the current generation of Intel stuff, it's powerful enough to do the premix and the mix all in one go, which is not a very practical thing. But you can do it. So the tendency is let's just do it. Where if you went into a pre-mix session and you knew that you could not continue this for mixing, so you had to bake in those changes, you had to do the audio edits, you had to clean it up, you had to compress where you needed to, you had to do all that tidy up work before you started into a mix. It was easier to separate the process because of the limitations of the software.
Yeah.
We've covered a fair bit in today's chat. Is there anything in particular that we didn't get a chance to talk about? What about Radio NYP? What's that at?
Well, the radio has, been a constant throughout lockdown, and into the free lockdowns, which has been very positive. We've just recently passed around 25,000 listeners over the course of 3 years. And it's very fitting because it's coming towards the end of the project, and it'll finish at the end of June here. So we don't know what the future holds for the radio just at the minute, but we're very proud of what we've achieved at this point, and we're working on a wee document. And I don't want to. Again, it's not a big deal, but I don't want to give away too much about it because it's a cool wee idea to sort of leave a legacy of what the radio was and stuff like that. If it isn't to continue on afterwards, and sort of show people what impact it had. But we're still creating shows on a daily basis. There's some fantastic stuff there. The Tim Neuhaus has done some cracking interviews. And Rand Shaw has started a new podcast called Shoshin, looking at studies that universities have done, but then bringing it back to the people that have been studied and seeing what their reaction is. They're like, so some really interesting stuff going on there, and definitely get over to Radio AMP and listen to all the podcasts and all the shows that are going out.
Good shout. So if you've any questions for us, or there's anything you want to know about the studio, about the training that we do, about your mixed projects, even just some feedback sessions, then by all means get in touch. You can reach out to Craig at ampsstudio.com, or you can see us on Facebook. You can join in on the podcast group, of course. You can reach Sean through Sean at radioymp.
Well, radioymp@gmail.com, or we'll go for that.
That's the most immediate way, yep. And you can, of course, leave comments here, or feel free to get in touch. If you have any questions you want us to address, or anything that you think that you need help with, or you'd like our assistance, that's what we're here for. So thanks very much for staying with us to the end, and we'll be in touch again very soon. Thank you, and see you next month.